Sean, I want to dive deep today into the sugar diet. I've had some personal success with it myself over the last couple of months, and it's caught in a big traction online. But before we dive a little bit deep into it, let's set the tone here. Can you break down and explain what the sugar diet is in your terms?
Sure. I think sugar diet basically is the practice of isolating sugar in the absence of protein and fat. Okay. Now, that is the key. In order for sugar fasting to work, it has to be isolated sugar. We're not talking about pastries and candy bars. Okay. Because now you're bringing in fats and now you're totally defeating the purpose of the sugar diet mechanism. So, when we isolate sugar in the absence of protein and fat, what happens is almost like a shock to the system. And what happens is the liver is forced to burn off excess isolated sugar. And the liver is a very, very powerful organ. And there's three different mechanisms that will happen when you kind of pour sugar gas on the liver fire. And that's kind of what happens because of the function of the liver itself. Now, when you bring too much protein or too much fat into that equation, you will blunt the mechanism altogether, and the metabolic effect and the hormonal effect that you're trying to achieve will not take place. Now, with that all being said, the sugar diet could potentially be used as a mechanistic lifestyle, but I think it needs to be weaved in with more balance, and we can talk more about that in a minute.
Yeah, we'll get into to all that, and I'm glad we set the tone here. You know, you mentioned this mechanism being blunted when we bring too much fat or sugar. What is the goal of eliminating protein and fat and sticking strictly with sugar? What are we trying to fire, whether it's metabolically, hormonally within the body?
Well, it's a mosquito buzzing around the internet, and everywhere you go, you're going to hear about FGF21. Okay, this is the hormone that ramps up through the isolated sugar mechanism. So when you consume isolated sugar in the absence of fat and protein, the first thing your body is going to do is it's going to ramp up FGF21 production. Now, this hormone, and there's a lot of hormones that I'm very familiar with for the last 25 years of doing this. This is a new one to me. So the premise of this hormone is it's very anti-inflammatory and it ramps up BMR, basal metabolic rate, or resting metabolic rate, ramps it up really, really high while being very anti-inflammatory. And the key word here is in acute released doses, right? Acutely. So we don't know what extended periods of time can do to the body. And because this is like all diets, in any type of calorie deficit, sugar diet or sugar fasting itself is a stressor. So just like anything, I'm a huge believer in intermittent fasting, but at the end of the day, it's a stressor. Keto diet, ketosis is a stressor. Calorie deficit is a stressor. And anytime you're putting too much stress on the body, it's going to release excessive amounts of three stress hormones: cortisol, adrenaline, and glucagon. And when you have extended releases of these hormones, it could potentially be a double-edged sword and backfire on you. So again, this is all about the acute release of FGF21. Now that's mechanism number one. Do you have questions on that before I talk about mechanism number two?
No, let's move on to mechanism two.
So mechanism number two is going to be increased T4 to T3 conversion. This is your thyroid hormones. Now, I've talked about this for 2+ decades. We'll talk about my mechanism that I use where it's fats up, carbs down, carbs up, fats down. We can talk a little bit about that in a second. It rhymes with sugar diet very closely, and that's what caught my attention. But what ends up happening is I've told people this for years and years and years. I'm not anti-keto. I'm not anti-carnivore. I just don't think that you can adhere to them for long periods of time. And when you do, I think there's hormonal downfalls. And one of the first ones is your thyroid hormones will decline rapidly because most dieters and the general population in general doesn't understand that glucose is a building block of thyroid and leptin hormones. And so when you eliminate glucose or sugar from your diet, from carbs, you downregulate that T4 to T3 conversion. Of course, your thyroid gland is your metabolic gas pedal. So this can slow down your BMR, and it can also halt fat loss. And at the same time, now you're damaging your thyroid gland potentially. And this is why a lot of people who go on an extended period of a keto diet end up being thyroid medication, because glucose or thyroid hormones themselves are a glycoprotein. So we need that glucose to convert T4 into T3 down. With that being said, The body will do that through a process called gluconeogenesis when glucose is not present, right? It'll convert protein into glucose, which is an argument for the keto community because they are obsessed with the fact that no, the body prefers to run on ketones. Well, if that was really the case, then why does the body want to convert protein to glucose if it wants to run on ketones? Right? So it's just sidebar, something to say there, something to be mentioned for that. But at the end of the day, because you're pouring all this sugar onto the liver in isolation, T4 to T3 production, thyroid production ramps up really high. Now, there is some anecdotal stories circulating around. We need more research with a lot of people doing this. And all of a sudden, their thyroid starts firing up again. And they don't need thyroid medication. So time will tell. So that's mechanism number 2. Any questions on that?
I want to discuss how people are effectively using this and what you think the goal should be if somebody is looking to utilize it. I use sugar fasting and sugar diet, and maybe we can kind of explain the difference between those two to get ready for a cruise a couple weeks ago, and I saw rapid fat loss in like a 7-day window. But I think a lot of people are going to hear this and say removal of protein, like now I'm sacrificing muscle loss. What's going to happen to my training? Is my training going to decrease? Is my strength going to go down? Because everybody's been told, 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein is ideal for muscle growth. So pulling the protein out, like what happens to our muscle growth? Is the sugar diet are we gonna sacrifice? Are we gonna lose hard-earned mass? Like how are people effectively using this and still staying big and ripped at the same time?
Well, if we're talking about big and ripped guys, that's one conversation versus somebody who's obese and type 2 diabetic, right? Those are two different conversations.
Okay.
So the type 2 diabetic that's overweight needs to lose 40, 50, 100 pounds. They could actually do sugar fasting and isolation for days on end and get great results without losing muscle because they have so much fat to lose. Their body's using their fat for fuel, right? Now, if we come back to our world, the fitness guys who are all into this stuff and who are actually disciplined enough to stick to the regimen to see how it works. If we think about protein itself, and I'm sure Stan talked about this, there is studies showing that you can go a lot lower and not lose muscle. I don't know the details of those studies. I didn't dive into those mechanisms and look at the structure of those studies. I know Stan has mentioned them several times, and obviously I trust his word. But with that being said,
yeah, I think he says about as low as 0.3 grams per body weight.
Now this goes back to one size doesn't fit all. I mean, a guy like me or you who's got this hard-earned muscle, I'd be kind of paranoid to go that low, right? Myself personally. And so we can talk about the protein backload that you can do with this for more experienced guys, because that's really the solution is the protein backloading at night. And that's how you're going to hit your protein number. Now, with that being said, I think it's important to note this about carbs in general and sugar fasting and the sugar diet protocol, regardless of which way you do it, because there's like the honey diet, there's the some fairy diet or something out there as well now, right? Because again, it's a mosquito buzz around the. But the more carbs you have in your diet, the less protein your body actually needs because carbs are very muscle sparing and they reduce protein turnover. So if your carbs are really, really high, it means you don't need as much protein. Now, we could flip this coin and go the other way. When carbs are really, really low, you're probably going to need more protein, right? So it's a calorie thing. And I've gotten peeled, and we can talk more about this, eating 250 grams of protein a day to 275 grams for 75 days in a row on 75 hard. And my blood work was incredible on an ultra high protein diet. And this, I guess I sidebar that just to mention that the human body is very resilient. And, everything works until it doesn't work, right? And so, the best diet is always adherence. But at the end of the day, going back to what you said, I think there's two things that are going to come from the sugar diet. You just mentioned one of them, is that now guys like me aren't worried about going catabolic or not getting enough protein or I'm going to freak out. And it's just like the anabolic window post-workout. That's been shattered now. Protein synthesis is a 24-hour cycle. It doesn't just happen after your workouts, right? So with that being said, the more carbs you have in your diet, the less protein you need. The more muscle mass you have, obviously, you're going to want to err on going a little higher on the protein side. But the less muscle mass you have, the less protein you actually are going to need to maintain that mass. But we have to be careful, in my opinion, if you're sedentary and you're not active, going below that 0.4 or that 0.3 would be risky because now you're going to put muscle mass in jeopardy. And let's face it, muscle is metabolism. It's the key to longevity. mean, people who have more muscle mass live 10 to 20 years longer than people who don't. So hopefully that kind of covers the base of like, okay, this is cool. The second thing that's going to happen from this is carbs now are going to make a comeback, because most people think that carbs make them fat. And of course, we could talk here in a minute when we talk about adherence and stuff. I could talk a little bit more about, I have like 4 or 5 real life examples confirming 110% why carbs do not make you fat. You can set aside the research and just look at the stories that I tell you, and it will shock you. So the answer is that this is what most people don't realize, especially bodybuilders who are inexperienced. Old school bodybuilders know this. The Lee Haneys of the world got shredded on 65% carbs, 30%, or 60% carbs, 30% protein, 10% fat. They got shredded for years. They're the like most lean muscular athletes in the world. And they've always put fats in the basement and had carbs sky high and always had moderate protein, because they don't need to have sky high protein because of all the carbs in their diet being so muscle sparing.
That was always the approach that I took. I started competing in 2008 and competed all the way through till late 2016. So about an 8-9 year window there. And it was always, we start very high carb, super low fat. And then by the end of the cut, whether it was 12, 16, 20 weeks long, carbs are dropping, right? Because you're super focused on getting super shredded. The protein would then skyrocket, to 1.5, 2 grams per body weight. And fat stayed low the entire time. Like it was always low fat. The fat conversation really came into play, I think, in what I've seen around the mid 2000 teens, right? 15, 16, a lot of keto stuff. And then obviously, when carnivore caught a wave. And I think the problem in those spaces, it just becomes so dogmatic. People shape their identities around these diets. And that's always been the conversation I try to bring here, is like, all of these can work. But as you already said once, it's going to be the compliance is going to be the main driver of all of this. I'd love to get into some of the case studies and stories that you've witnessed. And I'll tee it up with, I've done 3 7-day windows of sugar fasting first. So I followed the Mark Bell, Smelly Belly protocol. Like, he was the first introduction I heard about it. Somebody sent it to me 3 months ago. And at first take, I pushed it off. I said, that's just Mark being Mark. This dude is crazy. He's going to try anything. And then I started to really look into it. I was like, there's something here. So I tried it the first time, the sugar fast. So that was like Mark's 2.5 days of only sugar, then a huge carb backload on day 3. Then you do 2.5 more days of only sugar, then a huge protein backload at the end of the 3rd day. Once again, one thing I did notice, and you mentioned it there, was I noticed a decrease by day 2 in my strength in the gym and my ability to push it. The second time around, I did what he would call the sugar diet, which was fruit, sugar throughout the day, huge protein meal with some starchy carbs at night. That second week, I actually had a greater fat loss. Strength stayed up. But one thing that shocked me, Sean, and I'm curious if you know what's driving this, is my quality of sleep drastically went up. Like, I was sleeping like a baby, 8+ hours of sleep, tracked it on the Aura. I was cracking 93s, 94s, sleep efficiency every single night. And then my energy throughout the day was like, there were no mid-afternoon crashes. In my cardio capacity. So I do a 45-minute ruck, and I have since I started doing 75 hard back in December. I cut like a minute off of my mile ruck time just with this small, simple change.
You don't even know you're doing it. Yeah, you don't even know what's happening. You just do it automatically because you have more energy.
I would just see it at the end of the tracker. I'm like, oh my God, I went a minute faster here. So what was driving maybe those 2 changes there with both the sleep quality and just the cardiovascular increase? And then talk to us about some of the successes that you've seen with various types of people.
Well, the first thing that happens is you're talking about the third mechanism with the energy, right? The third mechanism is your body, when your liver is dosed with sugar like this, and I think we need to make this important. We're not talking about candy bars and stuff like that. We're not just talking about gummies and Starburst either, right? We're talking about fruit juices, maple syrup, honey, raw cane sugar. People are afraid of it, but we just extract it from sugar cane and sugar beets, just like we extract olive oil from olives. It's not much different, guys, right? So it's isolating it and understanding that. And then, you mentioned the energy going up. Well, when you give your body all these carbs and your liver just starts firing and burning it off through these mechanisms, you increase ATP production. So what ends up happening is when you isolate the sugar without the protein and the fat, your liver starts producing more ATP through mitochondrial uncoupling, okay? And this is going to temporarily help you rip through more stored body fat. And so what's happening with the sleep quality, because I know it's the same thing, and some people have the opposite effect. And I think it depends on your starting point and the current microbiome of your gut as well, because your body can take some time to adjust to the fruit, especially if you're moving from a carnivore or keto type of diet, which a lot of overweight, obese people who are in stall city, as Cole Robinson would call it, right? They're stuck at a plateau because what ends up happening is they downregulated the thyroid and leptin hormones, and they've desensitized their cells to insulin. And so when you start bringing carbs back into your plan, you tank cortisol. And all of a sudden you're sleeping better, because when cortisol is in the basement, your body releases more melatonin and serotonin. So this is why I always say when I'm done fasting, even on a low carb deplete day, what I call a deplete day, this is where protein sky high, veggies are through the roof, fats are higher, and there's carbs are in the basement completely. But whenever I break my fast on those days, I throw in a piece of fruit because I want to blunt the cortisol. Because during the fast, you're kicking up your sympathetic nervous system. Again, it's a stressor, just like sugar fasting. When you kick up the sympathetic nervous system, you're going to release more of those stress hormones I talked about, adrenaline, glucagon, and cortisol. Well, the thing that's going to blunt those after the fast is glucose from carbs. And so that's probably what you're experiencing, Frank, is that you just got cortisol balanced and bam, you started sleeping better. Now, other people have had the opposite problem, and it's because probably they were in a different spot hormonally than you were when they started the plan. So this goes back to, again, the best thing is adherence. And what is your actual starting point? That's going to determine how you actually react to this. Some people can jump right in and just go right at it. Other people are like 3 or 4 days in, like, life sucks, my gut hurts, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, their microbiome adjusts and they're fine. That's what happened to my wife. She was bloated for like 3 days and she's been fine ever since. She's down like 9 pounds doing this protocol. So, but that is the third mechanism. So you had that first one, which is FGF21. The second one is T4 to T3, more thyroid hormones. And that third one is ATP production, or the uncoupling of the mitochondria. Hopefully that covers the basis.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And to set a little bit of context for the listener, and then maybe we can dive into it, because I think very few people are going to have a starting point where maybe you and I are, right? So I was about 237, probably hovering around 10, 11%. I mean, I had visible abs, very, very vascular. I was eating a bodybuilder-esque type of diet, about 450, 470 carbs per day. Protein was right around 250, and then my fats were around 90. And I'd been kind of in that. It was almost a maintenance period. Like, I wasn't growing with that much food, but I wanted to see what would happen. And I had a cruise that I was going on. I was like, I see people are losing a lot of fat. Like, I got a short window here. Let me see what can happen. And I went from 237 to 229 in 7 days. And it was like peeled. Like, I'd never experienced anything in my 20 years in the health and fitness space, the way my body responded to it. But that was my starting point. To the guy out there that's maybe carrying 20, 25 pounds of extra body weight, how can he use this? What should his approach be? And what should some of the things that he should be looking to expect if he wanted to jump into sugar fasting, sugar diet?
Well, the first thing is always, expectations are everything, right? So the first thing that's always required with any type of protocol is a little bit of freaking patience, right? Because it's not going to just like start happening for you overnight. And again, even we could take 3 of the same guy that you just described, and all of them could respond differently, Frank. But at the end of the day, you should feel more energetic. You should definitely see your sleep quality go up, especially if you manipulate carbs like most people do and keep them low. And you should feel better pumps in the gym. Ever since I started sugar fasting, I'm completely off of pre-workout supplements now. I do creatine. I do like 5 grams of creatine, like almost every day, maybe every other day here and there. I'm not that great of a responder off creatine. I do more for the brain benefits now. But with that being said, everybody will respond differently, but there's no doubt the commonality should be higher energy, better focus clarity, better pumps in the gym, because you're going to fill up your glycogen tank. It's going to be completely full, right? And so this is what happens when people do carnivore and keto and they add carbs back into their diet. We could talk more about that. But as far as other changes go, I think it's just a matter of everybody's guts in a different spot. And this is the one thing I've noticed. I had a couple of videos that took off on YouTube talking about sugar fasting, really took off. So I was able to comb through the dumpster fire of comments and actually find some really good ones. And finding people talk about, I'm experienced like us, but my gut hurt. And then other people come in, I'm experienced like you. I love this. I'm experienced like you. I hate this. I can't do it. So it just goes back to just any type of protocol whatsoever you're talking about. 50% of this stuff's going to be between our ears. Like, what are we believing's happen? That's another conversation. That's another podcast, right? Right. But it is the truth. And at the end of the day, where are you starting out body composition wise isn't as powerful as where you're starting out with your belief system, your BS, right? And so I think that's a starting point as well. If you're going into this doubtful and skeptical and looking for something bad to happen, what you focus on expands, vice versa. Going into this excited, think it's going to work great. Chances are it's probably gonna. It's not a blanket statement that that's going to happen, but that is 50% of it. And I think you would agree with me if we look at science.
It's so crazy you say that, Sean, because my girlfriend and I did this together. She's incredible, like such an amazing woman. Like she's on board. She'll support everything. She jumped into 75 hard with me just because she wanted to do it with me back in December. I told her I was doing this. I was excited and looking forward to it because I had looked at some of Mark's videos. I saw it. I'm like, this is going to be awesome. Like I was so pumped up. And my experience was like one of great results and benefits. By day 2, she's like, Frank, I'm so hungry. Like I'm not eating enough. Like I don't feel good, this and that. She was at a very similar starting point. Like she walks around shredded abs year round, 120 pounds, like got a great figure physique, like has trained for 20 plus years, is a trainer herself, like was probably in a better starting point leanness wise than I was. Now she does have some thyroid issues. She takes medication for, but she didn't think that it was going to work. Like she had so many doubts. She's like, I'm doing this because I want to be involved in it with you. That's the type of woman that she is. But her mindset going into it was one that was going to fail. She started talking to other people. They're like, yeah, that sounds stupid, da, da, da. And she was just like ingesting herself with negativity. And I told her, I said, you went into this from the beginning expecting it to fail. And that's exactly why it did. How can you and I follow this exact same thing? We do so many things similarly. My results are at a level 10 and yours are at like a 2. And it's so interesting, that belief system part. I saw it happen in our life.
Yeah, you can't deny that. It's always a factor. And so I think that plays a huge role in this. And then what is your BS about sugar? What's your belief system? Because I think that's important as well. Because if you're coming into this thinking sugar kills you, dead, I mean, the charlatans are everywhere out there. Paul Saladino is going to tell you broccoli's killing you dead. People who eat vegetables live longer. Gary Brecker's going to tell you cold plunging is the best fat burner on earth. New studies show cold plunging makes you hungry, makes you gain more weight. I mean, we could go on and on. Ken Berry tells you not to only eat bananas on your birthday because the sugar is going to kill you dead too, or make you fat and cause fatty liver. Have you ever seen a fruitarian? They don't have an ounce of body fat on them, and their blood work's typically incredible. I don't recommend crazy extreme stuff like that, but at the end of the day, we're all getting a drink of water with a fire hose when it comes to hacks and tricks and all that stuff. And it goes back to the beginning of this conversation. At the end of the day, the king of all diets is adherence.
What should people, not to put you on the pedestal here, put you in a position where you're going to make a claim here when it comes to sugar, but what are the lies that people are believing and what is the truth about sugar? Does it cause diabetes? Like, is it going to make you fat? Is it addictive? Or are you going to become, a sugar addict? Like, what are some of the myths and misbeliefs out there that people are believing around sugar? And what is the truth when it comes to this discussion conversation we're having?
I think the first thing you need to talk about is if we look at a chart from the last 25 years of sugar intake in America, for the last 25 years, the bar goes like this. Sugar intake decline, okay? Obesity, right, up, okay? Now, if we look at a chart of oils intake, it's the opposite. It's a hockey stick on the map of how much oils we're consuming. Now, this goes back to, I'm not just isolating seed oils or PUFAs. I'm just talking about fat in general, okay? And I see this with a lot of keto people as well. You have to understand how your body works and how macros work. And, at the end of the day, fats are yielding 9 calories a gram, over double the calories. So is it the sugar? Or is it all the extra oil that they're putting into all our snacks and that we're cooking our food with? And that the restaurants now cook everything in seed oils and everything in vegetable oils. And so I'm not fear-mongering saying that stuff's going to kill you or give you disease, but I will tell you this, it increases your calorie intake in a huge way. And at the end of the day, if we look at real world examples, like the guy who did the Twinkie diet, okay? The guy ate nothing but Twinkies and convenience store food and a protein shake every single day. And he put his body in a 400 to 500 calorie deficit. And I can't remember the time frame. I don't want to misquote the time frame, but I think it was 60 to 90 days. He lost over 20 pounds. And I think it was more like closer to 30. And I was like, okay, well, how much of that was muscle? Well, then when I dove deeper into the study, it looked like he was getting adequate protein as well. So maybe most of this was fat. Then I like, well, what about his blood work? His before and after blood work was incredible. I was like, man, this dude was eating nothing but sugar in a protein shake in his before. And you want to know why? Because it's not the sugar that's killing us. It's the fat around our organs in our belly. That's what's killing. That's why his blood work was terrible. It wasn't because he was eating sugar, because after he ate nothing but sugar and hit adequate protein, he lost all this weight and had his blood work was 10 times better. So it just goes back to the fact there's just so many myths out there. And so also understanding that there is a huge difference between sugar on its own and sugar and fat. And I talk about the Randall cycle a lot in my videos, and how the Randall cycle basically talks about how sugar and fats as fuel sources are antagonists. Okay, it's called the Randall cycle. Doesn't mean you can't get great results following a balanced approach like the zone diet. I just think it's going to be more difficult. You're going to have to maintain that deficit and count your macros a little tougher. So back in 2008, I started carb cycling, and I've been doing it ever since as a lifestyle. And so I'm biased to the carb cycling method because you don't eliminate any food groups, right? You can still have some alcohol and cheat food every weekend, and you're really not on a diet. You're not eliminating any food groups whatsoever. Now, again, I could adhere to that. That's why I'm biased to it. But that's what drew me to the sugar diet, because there was a lot of things that rhymed. And one of the things that rhymed was the isolated sugar, because the first thing I do with my high ticket guys and our clients, and this was in my ebook courses way back in the day when I sold over 1 million ebooks over the last 15 years, all on carb cycling, I have a rule: when fats are up, carbs are down. When carbs are up, fats are down. And it's the first rule that I give to clients. And because what will happen is people, if you look at people's plans and we start diving in and people start logging their food, you'll see that they combine those two ingredients a lot together. Now, the Randall cycle says that your body prefers one or the other, not both. Okay. And so what ends up happening is if you have too much fat and sugar or glucose in the bloodstream at the same time, they're competing against each other for fuel. So something has to be stored. Well, thankfully, if there's room in your muscle and liver tissue, the carbs can go there. But fat is much easier to store than any other macronutrient. That's why it's called fat. So the rule to follow in general, that fats up, carbs down, carbs up, fats down rule really rhymes very closely with isolated sugar, because you're just isolating it all by itself. Now, my rule was always protein always, right? For years, we've talked about 1 gram per pound of your goal body weight. Well, again, if carbs are sky high like they are in the sugar diet, that protein can come down much further and get the same result. So, but anyway, the whole myth about sugar, it's just like, all these keto guys are out there. And I think a lot of it has to do with they can't give up their bias because there's money there. Just the truth, right? I mean, guys they're making millions of dollars off of keto. They can't come out and say that it's not the only way. Carnivore is the same thing. And so if we look at studies, okay, and people who do extended periods of ketogenic diet or carnivore diet, there's not much research because it's still fairly new, but they rhyme closely. What ends up happening is you make yourself insulin resistant. And the reason why is because you're desensitizing your cells and your tissues to glucose, okay? So the very thing that you're trying to prevent by doing keto or carnivore, which is insulin resistance, you actually end up creating if you adhere to that diet the right way, okay? And so what ends up happening is people come back, well, are you really going to go the rest of your life without eating carb? I highly doubt it. So they bring carbs back in. Now they've desensitized their cells and their tissues, Frank. So the carbs come in, your insulin doesn't respond the right way. Your pancreas doesn't respond the right way because you've desensitized it all. Now they spill over. And if you don't have room in the energy tank of your muscle and liver glycogen, now you're holding more water, because for every gram of carb that you eat, your body holds almost 4 grams of water. So now you're holding all this water. You think what? See, I brought carbs back in and they're making me fat again. When really it was you avoiding the carbs that created this whole effect. Does that make sense?
100%. And it adds a layer of context to my personal experience. I used the carnivore diet and had a lot of success with it in 2019. I've shared it in my personal journey and story. It is a part of one of our programs that we teach as a tool. I think it can help people in our particular space solving a specific problem when it comes to discipline and structure and the addiction area that we work in, but it's very limited. We want to use it as a tool, never as a lifestyle. But I had a lot of success with it. I lost a lot of weight. I was in a very unhealthy place at the end of 2018 after I kind of hung up the bodybuilding trunks. And I saw tremendous results in the first 6 months. And then I got off it for a couple of years. And then I tried to bring it back around 2021, 2022. And it didn't work in the same way. And I couldn't understand. I was like, I had all this success. And when I went back to eating regular again, like I normally would, which is a very similar model to you, protein consistent, carbs, if I'm going to have them, I'm going to eliminate fat from the meal. My body rejected everything that I did. And I almost got as unhealthy as I was prior to starting the carnivore diet the first time. What was interesting for me is the week after. So I did 6 weeks, 3 weeks of sugar diet with a week break in between. The week that I took off, I noticed almost a post-show rebound effect to introducing starch back. And that blew my mind, because it's not like my carbs were low. When I was competing, my carbs would get low in the final weeks leading up to a show. So obviously when I introduced them back, there was this massive rebound effect. I noticed it even though I was eating nothing but fruit, maple syrup. I had a little bit of candy just because I enjoyed it. But the basis of it was fruit, sugar, maple syrup. But the week that I got off of it and I reintroduced like 500 grams of like starchy carbs back in, like there was this massive rebound effect, like muscular swelling up against the skin. Curious as to what was driving that.
You know what? It's new to me. Hypercompensation. It sounds like to me. You're shocking your system. I know that Mark Bell recently posted about Rich Piana. He did it. He did the same thing, but he used rice instead of sugar. And rice kind of is sugar in a certain aspect, right? And so, right. So I think again, when it comes to this protocol, it's very powerful. I think it's a lot of fun. I think like anything, if you overdo it or abuse it, then it could backfire on you. And I also think that you need to have some balance. Like by the time the weekend comes, I'm ready for some bacon and eggs. So I like to do this 5 days on, 2 days off. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, I want my breakfast food and enjoy myself. Number two, I want to have a cheat meal or maybe even a couple cocktails. And number three, you need the fats. Like we got to bring some fats in there to balance things out. Otherwise, we're going to be, if you sit here and just do sugar isolation for months on end, if you're 100 pounds overweight, yeah, you're going to achieve the goal. But at the end of the day, you're going to start being deficient. And you are going to release those 3 stress hormones higher and faster and longer than you should. And so this is why balance is so important. And again, this goes back to this just being a tool in your tool belt to experiment with. But I always throw in a couple deplete days where it's higher fats and lower carbs, at least 1 or 2 a week. And then that prevents the deficiencies, gives me more variety, right? I still get my bacon and eggs on the weekend. And this goes back to the very beginning of this conversation. The best plan to follow is one that you could adhere to, because that's really what it boils down to. That's the king of all diets, adherence.
What does a day of sugar diet, sugar fasting look like you from wake up to go to bed? Are you utilizing it in fasting? How, if any way, has your training evolved? Walk us through. You gave us good kind of, high level view of how you set your week up. Let's get into the weeds if you're open to discussing it. Like what exactly is Sean using?
I got it dialed in now. The first thing that if it's a weight training day, okay, depending on the time of day that I'm training, I'm going to have about 15 to 25 grams of sugar before the workout. And if it's later in the day, I might have a full blown meal. But if it's like in the morning, right when I wake up and I'm heading to the gym, I don't want to like eat all that fruit and that fruit juice. So I'll jump some Trader Joe's gummies because they're just pure cane sugar, right? A little, and maybe a little bit of juice. I give myself like 30 grams of carbs to get just to feel through the workout. And if you look at research, the Cori cycle kicks in anyway. You could train fasted, like, and still have almost the exact same performance and results as if you don't train fasted. It's really just a personal preference thing. Now, for a typical day, it's 3 servings of about 150 grams of carbs. Okay. That's going to consist of 3 pieces of fruit chopped up into a big bowl. Okay. So today I did a banana. Nectarines are in season up here in Michigan. Freaking tasting delicious right now. And grapes. I pour maple syrup, honey, and sugar, cane sugar over top of it. I don't dump shitloads, but I cover it. And I'm not a huge fan of the flavor of honey. I never have been. But when you combine hugging with maple syrup and sugar, it's a total new ballgame. Yeah, it's a total new ballgame. And so I pour that over. So that's just my base meal. I'll have a side of 8 to 10 ounces of juice. Today I did tart cherry. Okay. And then I'll have about 10 of Trader Joe's gummies. They have these amazing gummies at Trader Joe's. They don't have all the crap in them, like, Starburst or Skittles and all that shit. So, but yeah, so I do 3 of those on training days. And then at night, I bring in the protein. So I'll have a really big dinner. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that I get at least usually probably 60, 70 grams in that meal. At least hit 50, right? And then by the end of the night, I'm hitting 125 to 150 grams of carbs. Now, when I don't sugar fast, I'm closer to 200 on protein, but because the carbs are so high, I don't need all that protein. So just to start, like example, chicken marsala, healthy chicken marsala, low fat, keeping fats in the basement with white rice. And then I'll have a protein shake before bed.
And what is that? That gets you around 2,800, 3,000 calories total for the day. I was just trying to kind of do the rough math.
It puts me right around 2,700.
Okay. That's actually the number that I wrote down was 2,700. It's crazy.
It's funny when I count it, I'll come in at like 23, but I know it's like 27 because we underestimate how much we consume by at least 30% or more. Right. So my goal is always like I hit 2,000 calories a day. I know I'm at 25 to 2,800 when I do that.
And you're utilizing this for performance, longevity, focus. Obviously, you're the ripped grandpa. You're walking around shredded six-pack year round. So I doubt it's a fat loss driver for you. Maybe it is, but is it more you enjoy the performance benefits, the mental performance? Like what has been the hook to keep you on it?
I think it's a couple things. Number one, my pumps are ridiculous and the vascularity has been insane. And people in the gym are like, dude, what is going on? Like they see me freaking pumping and it's just like the veins are. So for me, a guy like us, like we're loving that. Like that's our wheelhouse, right? That's our drug right there. It makes me realize that I have probably been living in a mild depleted state using carb cycling all these years, not getting the pumps that I would always rely on pre-workouts for the pump instead of relying on real food. So that's really my number one draw out of the gate from a performance aspect. The second draw is like sometimes fasting gets old and it's just fun to eat. Other times it's fun not to eat because you can get more done. So it just depends on what cycle of life you're in, what phase of life you're in. So that and I feel like I just am able to eat way, way more carbs and stay just as peeled. And I also feel like this is a method. I have a photo shoot 7 weeks from Sunday. So I'm really going to start cleaning it up. No booze, no cheap food, the whole nine. And I'm going to use this. And because I don't like, if you think getting ready for a photo shoot is fun, I got news for you. It's not. You're going to be freaking hungry. And this protocol takes that away. Like if I'm hungry, I just go eat more fruit and honey and maple syrup and sugar. Like, because your liver's just rapidly burning it off. And so with that being said, it goes back to adherence. I think on a cutting cycle, I'm like, man, this is going to make adherence so much more fun. So to me, I look at this and like it's a new toy I'm playing with. It's kind of the way I look at it. And so maybe it'll get old, but Frank, I've been at it 4 or 5 days a week now for a couple of months, man. And I'm just like, I just don't like every Monday. My wife's just like, sugar fast tomorrow. I'm like, yeah. So she goes to the store and gets it done for me. So like any plan, I'm not anti-keto or anti-carnivore. If it works for you, great. I can't stand those diets from a performance aspect. My body just never responded good. It doesn't mean I won't work with clients that do it. I'm just going to have them do some refeeds, make sure they don't screw up their hormones. We're going to make sure that we bring those carbs in the right time to make sure that the scale continues to move down, they don't lose muscle, and performance stays high as well. And so for me personally, I'm excited to do my very first photo shoot doing this. And we'll see what happens. I'll keep you posted.
Absolutely, man. And definitely something I'm interested in because after going through it, just short experience that I had, I'm like, this could be something if I really locked it in for 4-6 weeks, like it could get me shredded. I wanted to grow again. I had this goal of being 250 again with abs, which is kind of where I'm trying to build myself back up to because prior to the cruise, I was 250 in December, but I was fat. And then I did 75 hard through February 14th. I got down to 230. I bolted back up to about 240. I got really sick, got strep throat, fell back down to 230. Then I had this cruise and I was like, I need to be lean and shredded for the cruise. So I got down to 226. Now I'm coming back up. I'm about high 230s right now, still visible. I'm like, I'm going to get to 250 and I'll figure out what the next step is going to be. But it'll probably be utilizing something longer, right? 4, 6, 8 weeks, like a sugar fast to see where I can really get to, hopefully maintaining a lot of that muscle mass. I'm really curious kind of how that plays out and I'll stay in touch and always follow that journey along. I've noticed the pumps there as well. You know, I train hypertrophy. I have for 20 plus years. I came up in the space, followed Ben Pakulski, trained with those guys for a very long time. It's what I still stuck with. And I probably will die in the gym trying to maximize the pump, right? And I'll be happy doing that. With your training, like, have you changed anything? What's your approach? How many days per week are you training? Are you supersetting things? Are you taking rest periods? How are you combining this with the right type of training to get those maximum pumps that you talked about?
The only thing that I changed is a couple days of the week I decided to go full body. So, but my frequency and volume always stays the same. I'm a huge fan of more frequency, less volume. And it's just my age. I'm 54. You know, I'm the rip grandpa. I'm not going to go up 10 pounds like you. I'm going to stay right where I'm at, dialed, because the brand, I work for Superhuman. So I'm going to stay dialed in and rip for the brand and the, you know, all the advertising and everything we do. And it's just my lifestyle anyway. I've been this way for 20 plus years, you know, and during the winter, I might bulk up a little bit, but at the end of the day, right, this goes back to, I think this just goes back to carbs and the carb phobia and the fear of carbs and carbs making us fat. If we look at bodybuilders across the globe, it's not the case. We look at Chris Voigt, who did the potato diet. He ate 20 potatoes a day for 60 days in a row, and the guy lost 20 pounds. We look at the sugar diet. We look at like the blue zones. They live till they have more centurions than anywhere in the world, and almost all of them eat like 70% carbs, right? They probably move more than us and eat less crap out of a box. But with that being said, I think the lesson and the take home from all this, honestly, I think the big lesson of 2025 with the sugar diet is let's make carbs great again, because they're not evil, right? It's not evil. It's the carbs and the fats together in the crappy ass processed food. It's not carbs, potatoes. And, you know, do you really think God made fruit so that you can only eat it on your birthday?
You touched on it earlier, mindset, the BS meter. You know, I think a lot of guys, you know, specifically the ones that are in our space and community, they struggle with, and I don't like to use the labels here, but addictive type of personalities. Maybe they've had some guilt and shame around their relationship with food. Maybe food has been a coping mechanism, just like pornography has been. We see very similar patterns of behaviors with guys that are struggling in that area and also struggling with food. Curious your thoughts around how this can maybe help reframe people's relationships with food, with sugar, and it can be something that can maybe help guys if they're struggling with some guilt or some shame around food and their behaviors with it.
Well, we'll tell you, Frank, definitely not my wheelhouse as far as like the psychological state of somebody. I'm very huge on behavioral psychology and the mental aspect of it. I think the individual you're talking about, it does go back to them reframing their belief system a little bit. Because if they're going to go into the sugar diet, it could definitely be used as a tool that could help them if they have the right mental frame. That's it, right? If you don't have the right mental frame, it's not going to be for you.
Yeah. Let's talk about this pivot you made. You know, you mentioned you're part of Team Superhuman. Big fan of John now. You know, you spent years kind of in the entrepreneurship space, running your own brands, built a massive business there in the ebook space. Personally, what was it about Superhuman that kind of pulled you to it, and how is it kind of, you know, leveraged, or have you been able to leverage, you know, your brand, your experience, your image as the grandpa?
Thanks for asking, Frank. I really started with 75 hard like 3 years ago, and I did it. I was the second oldest guy in the group. There was 17 of us. I think 12 finished. And one man in the group was older than me. I kicked everybody's ass. Okay. And what I realized, now these guys are all athletes. They're all entrepreneurs. They all have money. Okay. Right. And I say that for a reason, because what I realized through that 75-day journey, guys don't know what they're doing when it comes to recomping. Like if you want to be peeled and shredded, you don't need another cold plunge, another gadget, another pill, another hack, right? And you don't need more. People think more is better. So what I realized is all the shit people, all those men, they're elite men, they have beautiful families, and they're all like, what's your secret? What's your secret? What's your secret? I'm like, I don't do dumb shit. Okay. You guys are all doing dumb stuff. And so that's what really made me realize, man, all these men are high performers, and they spend all this time and energy trying to be a high performer with their body composition, and they're doing it all wrong. And so that's what led me into high ticket coaching. And then, of course, as I went into that space, I started observing Superhuman, what John Madsen had built. And I realized that he had it all in place. And I saw a missing gap in his marketing. He was gearing all his messaging towards vanity and a six pack. And it's like, hey, you're rich, but you're fat, right? That's basically the messaging in a nutshell. Well, when you're in your 50s, like me, I'm 54 with 10 grandkids. A guy tells me that, I'm going to go like this. Like, it's just a natural, we're in our 50s. We don't really, a lot of guys that I work with, honestly, the abs are just the bonus side effect. They just want to feel better. They want to live longer. They want to sleep at night. They want to leave a legacy for their family. They want to be able to chase their grandkids around in the yard. The six pack is just the bonus. So what realizing that through 75 hard and seeing so many guys lost and looking at the transformations that John and his team, I mean, Frank, if you've seen them, these are the best transformations in the business. There's nobody even coming close to this guy. And he's got 50 coaches. And so when I came to him, I'm like, man, he's got it all dialed. All I have to do is target the age category. So I came to him and he agreed with me 100%. He loved the brand that I created with Rip Grandpa. He's like, I need to target guys in their 50s and 60s with different messaging. So we're not talking about vanity and a six pack anymore. Yes, we will get you one. It's freaking guaranteed. But what we are going to do is we're going to build you a legacy body, right? Like, we're going to help you dominate your final chapter in life like a pro athlete. And that's why it's super expensive. I mean, 10K is our lowest price point. So we're not messing around. But this goes back to adherence. At the end of the day, the main reason I'm doing it is because when you put 10K and you pay attention. You buy my ebook, I might keep your attention for 5 to 7 days. You just don't put enough skin in the game. So you're guaranteed the results or your money back. And guess what happens? You get the coaching, the accountability, and the community to adhere to the plan. So you build a lifestyle. So I'm all about, like, I love selling one-offs. I love the ebooks. I love the pills. But at the end of the day, I'm not changing people's lifestyle. With Superhuman, we're changing people's lifestyles.
How has being a part of a team in an environment like that maybe force you to level up personally? I mean, you once again walked around, ripped grandpa shredded, living an amazing life, have accomplished. I mean, you're well on your way to building a legacy that you're helping these guys create. But I have to assume when you get around an environment like that, it's a classic saying, you're the byproduct of the people you spend most time with. Like, when you get into an ecosystem that is bleeding excellence like that, like, what has been the ripple effect into your life, if any?
I think more than anything is more people in my life that I don't want to let down. And if that makes sense, right? So, because I think at the end of the day is like, it's just like fitness and weight loss. Okay. People will quit every week and they will justify it. I mean, even if we're talking about a guy like that's like we're talking about a rich businessman who has it all, but he's still fat. He'll start over every Monday and he doesn't feel any guilt about it because 85% of the people around him are the same way. But when you surround yourself with people that are at a higher level, what happens to you? They elevate you. And in my opinion, has always been this. This is why I left a small gym and went back to Lifetime Fitness recently, because I'm the biggest, most ripped guy in the gym. I'm in the wrong gym. I got to be around people that are better than me. So the second I'm the best guy in the room, I got to go. So I was at a point in my entrepreneurial career where I was kind of alone on an island and the only guy in the room, and I needed to be around more people. So that was a huge drawing point because these guys are creating a legacy, and I just want my little sliver so that I can have basically a huge impact as a rip grandpa on guys my age and show them how to dial it in. Because I know focus fitness it's the 5 F's, right? Stronger focus fitness, stronger faith, family, friends, finances, and future every single time. It's the gateway drug.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right in consistency with our fives. We have 5S. The only difference would be freedom and future. And it probably is the same kind of thing we're aiming at, right? I think, in order to create the future of your life, you got to be walking in freedom, which is just living life on your terms, not being a slave to anything, but also like enjoying the time that you have here on earth. Like, it's not just about work, building a legacy. It's like enjoying the people that you're building the legacy with, going on the trips, having the family time. So that's kind of, what we mean there when we talk about freedom.
Yeah, man. You have the Ferrari in the driveway, but if you don't have the memories and experiences, what good is it?
Amen. Amen. Um, what is that shift that, we'll have some guys that are maybe in your target there, 50 plus, but a lot of guys are, 30, 35, maybe have built some success. They have a family, but they look in the mirror and they're below average and they've accepted it for a long time. They're not surrounded with the right type of people. What shift needs to take place in somebody's mindset to get them to buy into belief system or philosophy of what you guys are kind of creating over there at Superhuman?
I don't, that's That's a question that is hard for me because when I turned 54 years ago, I kind of made a decision that I don't care about that anymore. Because, if they're not wanting the help and they don't see that it's a problem and they're accepting mediocrity, they're not a good fit. So to me, that person's mind is just, they're just not a good fit for our culture, period, because we're all about being excellent and winning, right? And we want to lift everybody else up around us. So if you're one of those guys where I have to say, don't you realize how much better life would be if you got a six pack? That's not my guy. Like I shouldn't have to convince you of that. You should look in the mirror and say, this shit's unacceptable. Let's fix it.
Yeah. No, I agree. 100%. Sean, this has been amazing, man. Really, really enjoyed this. Anything that we haven't yet discussed here you want to make sure we kind of weave in regards to sugar fasting, sugar dieting, or anything else that we haven't really touched on?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that most people listening to this could probably look at what they're doing with their fitness and they could probably replace all the time that they spend watching YouTube videos and cold plunging and researching the next peptide or the next pill or the next powder or the next cream and reinvest that time into doing everything that we just talked about, you know? And I have a framework called Quest. I'll just mention it real quick before we close this out. I think it'll really help people because it doesn't matter what diet you're following. But I think just being consciously aware of where you're spending your time. If you just, I just look at guys, I get on the phone with these guys. It's like, dude, I don't care about your cold plunges. You got to work out 4 hours a week. Like you got to be pumping iron like that. So people do the wrong stuff. They spend their time and energy doing the wrong stuff. And so I sent this to my stepdaughter today because she gained 30 pounds. She's had 4 kids and she gained 30 pounds over the last couple of months. And of course, we love her unconditionally, no matter what. Obviously, we notice it. Her mom beats her up more than I do. But I'm supportive. But she hired a dietitian and I'm all about it. Like, I'm sure I'm not going to agree with everything this dietitian says, but I know there's 100 ways to skin this cat. If she just has some structure and has some accountability, she'll do good. I gave her this sheet. It's called the Quest scorecard, CWESP. So it's like going on a quest, just spelled differently. So I'm a huge fan of acronyms, BS, belief system, right? Stuff like that. So Quest, calorie deficit, water, exercise, sleep, and protein. Does not matter what diet you follow. As long as you're in a calorie deficit, you're getting adequate water, getting adequate exercise, sleep, and protein, you will succeed as long as you adhere to the plan.
Amen. And a great place to wrap up today's conversation. Sean, tell the guys where they can follow you. You mentioned putting out some great content there on YouTube. What's the YouTube channel? If they're interested in learning more about you and the team over there at Superhuman, where can they learn more about that if they're the right type of fit, right, guys? Only if you're a high performer that is committed to excellence, which if you're listening to this and you follow the brand, hopefully you buy into that, or you're just here for entertainment. I don't know why, because these aren't entertainment podcasts. We're on the same mission as Sean and his team over there. So where can they get plugged in? Where can they learn more and connect with you online?
If you just go to ripgrandpa.com, if you're a high performer over 50 or 60 and you want to get dialed in for life guaranteed, that's where you're going to go to get my message. You'll know within the first 30 seconds of watching my video. I'm very proud of this video, by the way. It's the best marketing control I've ever created because it's real, it's authentic, it's 110% factual and true. I mean, as marketers, we always push the limits a little bit. And on this one, I just was real and honest. And then everybody else is just superhuman. So Supra with unlike yours, right? Superhuman Rip Grandpa is my social handles. So, yeah.
Love it. Guys, we'll have all that plugged down there in the show notes, direct links to Sean's sites and his YouTube, Instagram, and everything. We asked you this years ago. Guys, we'll have the first episode with Sean. He was on, I don't remember the date now. I should have pulled it up. I usually come better prepared with the actual episode number, but it was years ago we had Sean on. So we'll have that episode linked down. Obviously, I asked you this question then. You may not remember. Maybe your answer has changed, but we love to end the conversation with the same question for everybody. This episode 301. So we're celebrating kind of a big mark here. It's been a little over 6 years of running this podcast. Appreciate it, man. It's been consistency and adherence is the only thing that's driven the success that we've had here, right? So it's just like business, just like podcasts, just like fitness, just like relationships. All these principles are the same. But I'd love to get the guest take. So Sean, as we wrap it up here, what does it mean to live a supra or a supra-human life?
For me personally, it's to build Christ-like character. That's it. Like if I like, the more I become more like Jesus Christ, my Savior, the better man I am. I can never go wrong if I just have that in front of my mind. So throughout my day, anytime my head gets into a bad spot, I go right back to Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, and that's just my foundation.
Amen. And I know you and I have a mutual personal friend. He's been very influential in my life. Josh Cachadorian wrote the book on the standard. He is a standard for all of us. So incredible response, answer. Sean, God bless you, man. I appreciate you and everything you're doing with the team over there. Grateful to have you back on. Guys, sugar diet, it's not going to solve your problems. It could be a tool. Hopefully we gave you some information on it, on how you can set it up. Like I said, I've had a lot of success, and Sean is doing it as well. Look at those guns at 54 years old, man. Guys, if you're enjoying these episodes, as always, continue to support us. You can rate, review, but most importantly, if this conversation can benefit somebody in your life, do us a favor and then the blessing. But for Sean Hadstell, the Rip Grandpa, your host, Coach Frank here. We love you guys. See you in the next one.